It's your first time at Gaby, isn't it?
Yes.
What are your first impressions?
Informative, I think.
Yeah.
You know, there's something very special about being able to sit and be almost awash with everything that is happening across the continent. I think that's a blessing that you don't usually get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, so Arsima, you straddle the worlds of acting and entrepreneurship, which are two potent mediums of storytelling, right? So tell us first about how you balance your artistic integrity with the commercial imperatives, I guess, of branding Africa as a diverse continent with diverse narratives.
You know, it's interesting because I think it helps to balance these two seemingly diametrically opposite things by thinking them almost as one. So I've created almost a mission statement for myself as an artist, which is, you know, the bigger picture for me is how do I tell Africa's story? And I think that is something that is so nuanced and such a tough job that I know that even 50 years from now, I'll still be trying to do the same thing. So I think there is something woven in the artistry of storytelling that is really rooted in how to embody something that has multiple dimensions.
Absolutely.
I think that's the challenge of art, is how do we distill something to be two-dimensional? How do we distill something to still attract an audience, but not release it from the responsibility of accuracy? So yeah, for me, it's easiest to tie the two together.
Yeah. There is, of course, a great deal of interest right now in African stories, right? How then do you, as an African, tell the African story without falling into commodifying, I guess, the culture, and the risk of commodifying the culture and falling into the risk of stereotyping Africa?
That's a tough one because I think we are living in structures that make it almost impossible to not do that. I think there is something about the success of a story or a franchise in that it is easily commodifiable. How do we make t-shirts? How do we, you know, bring people to the African continent? There is this need of what are the positive benefits of telling this story outside of it being engaging.
Right.
So I think there is something about leaning into the multitudes of Africa. I think there's something about refusing to put Africa as a monolith.
Of course.
That means that every possible story from every continent has to be told. It can't just be one. It can't that be the story of the model citizen, of the immigrant that leaves Africa to make it somewhere else. It has to be, what about the people who stay? What about the people who didn't want independence for their country? All of the different sides of the story must be told.
That's a huge challenge, though.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think when we look at a lot of topics, we see that they are given that same grace. I think about all of the stories that I've watched on World War II. We've seen it from almost multiple different sides.
Perspectives,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
But I've not seen that same grace or the same amount of effort shown to what has happened in Rwanda,
Right.
or what has happened in Ethiopia with the Red Terror, what has happened in Nigeria when it got independence, or with the Biafran War. A lot of us don't know what are the other sides of that story. So then there is this very natural behavior to simplify it and assume that it stays at that simplified way, and giving other stories more nuance. Yeah.
Why do you feel that it's your role, Arsima, to tell that other side of the story? What made you want to tell this other side of the story?
I mean, my mother was just sitting on this seat.
And she's right here, actually.
So I think that is a massive factor in why I feel that it is necessary. But I think I don't know, I feel like I've been given the privilege to allow that to be my job. You know, I've been given the access to information. I've been given access to many different countries in Africa. And so what better way to pay that privilege forward than to make and ensure and hold with such tenderness the story of Africa, because not many people get that privilege.
Right.
And so my way of making sure that everybody understands the continent is by making sure that it's my job, it's my stewardship. Yeah.
It's your responsibility.
Exactly.
You talked about, I just wanted to come back to something you talked about earlier, and that is Africans living outside of Africa. And of course, the African diaspora is a major consumer of African narratives, of course. So how do you tailor the storytelling and branding in a way that resonates both to Africans on the continent, but also those in the diaspora, those here in America or in other countries?
That is such a good question, because I think there is a necessity to understand both perspectives. I think between the African that is living on the continent and the African that is not, we're both coming at Africa, the same target, but from different origins.
Right.
And I think honoring that is a massive thing, but I think also there's this necessity to no longer differentiate so starkly between the diasporic African and the not. I think the moment that we continuously try to entrench that divide, to assume that there is massive difference, is the moment that we do ourselves.
But isn't there though?
I don't know, because I know many of my friends who are Nigerian, second generation Nigerian Americans, who even in California, everybody around them is Nigerian. They have been with the same tribe. It's almost, I find that to be a more Nigerian upbringing than the one that I had in Benin, closer in proximity to Nigeria. So I think there is this understanding, or I feel like we forget that once we leave Africa, we still have Africa with us. Even in the place that we go to, we still try and make sure that those connections are still alive, even though we are physically not on the continent. There's nothing about us that, just because we have a different passport means that we are any less African. I speak Amharic at home. I find myself to be no different than the Ethiopian that has left at 14. And so I think bridging that divide would do so much more than fixating on the differences.
Yeah, talk to us about personal branding, because that's what we're talking about. And how have you leveraged your personal brand as an actress to make impactful moves as an entrepreneur, which you now are, in the context of Africa's branding?
I mean, what I have done is, I try and attend events like these. I try and listen and pick up as much as I can, because then I can take that specificity to my work. I think there is this need to silo everything, when in reality they are all rooted in the same things. So the moment that I use my personal brand for something outside of what is in my title, I actually, properly enrich myself when I go back into that job. I think there is this need to engage in interdisciplinary understanding and thought. And so I think like the biggest advice I would have is to everyone for them to diversify their portfolios. That's what you are encouraged to do in almost every single, financial decision you make. And the same should be done in the career and in the industry as well. The moment you understand as an artist the finances, the business aspect, the HR and administrative part, you yourself have given yourselves more tools than you were meant to have in any other scenario. So the way that I have just been developing my personal brand is to be as diverse in everything that I could.
And diverse, you have a physics degree, I read. And what else?
Public health
health degree as well.
Yes.
And here you are now, an actress. How do you make that transition?
I think for me there was, I followed the plan that had kind of been laid in front of me. My mother is laughing, it's true. But it was interesting because going to Yale, it had a great drama program. And I found myself there was something palpable in my jealousy really for everybody else who was able to go the scary route that I couldn't take myself. And once I graduated, I realized I had no other reason to hold myself back. I was the reason that I was not doing what I wanted. And I think recognizing the power that we have in ourselves as individuals to hold ourselves back is the most freeing thing that you can give yourself.
Absolutely. Now, Arsima, with the ever-changing media landscape, we were talking about this backstage, we were talking about the strike and so on, and how you have to, in a way, adjust, right, to the ever-changing landscape. What innovative approaches are you using to ensure that the African story and Africa's story not only is visible and continues to be visible, but also influential?
That's such a good question, because I think the African story is one of the most visible stories. We just don't know it. I think of going to Cape Town, and if you've ever been to Cape Town, the drive from the airport to city center, you drive by a massive expanse of slum dwelling. But every single house has a satellite dish. It may not have running water, but it has a satellite dish. That means that media is the most powerful way to affect change. And so I think the way to be innovative is to leverage this infrastructure that is already on the ground. I think there's something very different about Africa versus any other continent because of the route it had to take to develop. It meant a lot of steps were skipped because it had to play catch up. But it means that right at this moment, we are the most advanced than anyone else, because we are the most, what is the word? We're the most comfortable in this setting of technology, in the setting of renewable energy. And so the moment that we marry this new age way of disseminating information with the cultural background that I think we lost after colonialization, we'll have this, it cannot be mirrored by anywhere else. And that is where innovation lies, something that's never been done before. So I think there is something about ensuring that we tell a diverse range of African stories. I think there is something about recognizing that our audience, come 2050, 50% of the world will be from Africa.
Africa, absolutely.
We don't have to cater to anybody else. So there is something so freeing about knowing that our audience, already has that same cultural connection. There is not much we need to do. So there is empowerment in being able to sit comfortably and confidently in our Africanness. And I think that is where the innovation lies.
You mentioned Africa's population, a young population. What would be your advice today to a young African entrepreneur or a young African actor who wants to emulate what you've done, emulate your career, and tell the African story in a unique way? What would you tell them?
I would say the unique way of telling the African story is your way. I think there is so much of, distilling Africa into something that is simple and easily consumable, when in reality, every African story is a unique story. Every African story deserves to be told. And so I think the only advice I could give is to look to the people next to you. These are the people that will be your strongest partners in telling that story. It also allows you to understand different perspectives of your same lived experience. I think there is sometimes we as African youths, we have blinders on because we've also been brought up in a very competitive mindset of, there's only so many places available for us. So it's only me. When in reality, that goes against our natural, our culture of collectivism.
Absolutely.
I think the moment that we lean into that, we as a new generation lean into that, we become so powerful and unstoppable that it will shock many people. And I think that is where the greatness of Africa comes in, is its ability to shock, its ability to change people's minds, its ability to also be so familiar to everybody, regardless of where they come from. Yeah, I think it's that. It's leaning into the diaspora. We have such a massive and wide net of network, and so why should we turn our back towards our brother or sister in Barbados or in, you know, the UK or China? I think it's a long-winded answer, but it's to say that there are many avenues. The world is truly, at this moment in time, our oyster. Never has Afrobeats been so desperately, people are frothing for it, you know?
Absolutely.
Now is the time to really lean in and maximize on that.
Thank you so much. The African story needs to be told, and she's telling it so well and representing Africa so well. Ladies and gentlemen, Hasima Thomas, thank you so much. That was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Your mother, I know, is very proud of you. I can see it from here. Thank you so much. Thank you.